There's a wound you carry that you don't talk about, not because you don't feel it, but because you've never been allowed to. It doesn't show up with bruises or scars. It shows up in silence, in overthinking, in the feeling that something's always wrong with you. You crave closeness, but when people get too close, you push them away. You fear abandonment, but you don't know why. You've tried healing. You've read books, gone to therapy, changed your habits, but deep down, you still feel like something is missing, like there's a hole in your soul that nothing fills. Carl Jung believed that the most powerful forces in your life aren't the things you see, but the things you don't. He warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And one of the most powerful unconscious forces that shape who you are is your relationship with your mother, not just the woman who gave birth to you, but the psychological blueprint she created inside you. Her presence, her absence, her voice, her silence, the way she responded when you cried, the way she looked at you when you failed, the way you had to shrink or smile or succeed to feel safe around her. Most people never look there. Why? Because we're taught to idealize the mother, to see her as a saint, no matter how much she hurt us, to protect her image, even if it means losing ourselves. But Jung understood something most of us are afraid to admit. Your mother was human. And humans are flawed. Some are loving but absent. Some are present but suffocating. Some are kind with conditions. Others are cruel with a smile. And if you never examine how that shaped you, you will keep reliving that story, again and again, with lovers, friends, even with yourself. This is not a story about blame. It's a story about liberation, about finally understanding why you are the way you are, and how to break free. Because until you understand the wound your mother left behind, you will never fully heal. From the moment we're born, we're told a story, that a mother's love is unconditional, that it's pure, sacred, unquestionable. We see it in movies, the selfless woman who would die for her child. We hear it in religious texts, in lullabies, in every whispered reminder to be grateful for the woman who gave us life. Society teaches us to worship the idea of the mother, even if the reality was something entirely different. But Carl Jung warned us, when we idolize an archetype, we risk losing the truth of our lived experience. You may have grown up with a mother who was emotionally unavailable, narcissistic, hypercritical, or even abusive, yet you still hesitate to question her. Why? Because the guilt is suffocating, because somewhere deep inside, you were taught that to question your mother is to betray her, and more dangerously, to betray yourself. Jung introduced the concept of the mother archetype, a symbol buried deep in the collective unconscious. It has two faces, the nurturing, life-giving mother, and the devouring, possessive mother. The nurturing mother protects, uplifts, and nourishes the psyche. The devouring mother clings, controls, and consumes the child's individuality, often in the name of love. But in reality, these two extremes often coexist. Maybe your mother took care of your physical needs but neglected your emotional world. Maybe she praised you, but only when you met her expectations. Maybe she never hit you, but she used guilt and withdrawal like weapons. Maybe she smiled in public, but you were terrified of her mood swings at home. When you were a child, you didn't have the language to describe this. So, instead of blaming your mother, you blamed yourself. You learned to twist your emotions into shapes that would keep her calm. You learned that your worth was tied to her approval. You learned to survive. But now, as an adult, those survival strategies are keeping you stuck. You may find yourself afraid of authority figures, overly attached to validation, or trapped in relationships where you never feel seen. And it all leads back to the split between the idealized mother and the real one. Here's the truth. Your mother can be someone you love and someone who hurt you. She can be the person who gave you life and the source of your deepest psychological wounds. Real healing begins when you stop defending the fantasy and start meeting the reality with open eyes and an open heart, not to attack, not to blame, but to finally understand. Because if you keep holding on to the myth, you'll never meet the self that was buried underneath it. The mother wound is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. It whispers in your fear of asking for what you need. It echoes in the way you abandon yourself to be loved. It speaks every time you apologize for simply existing. But what is the mother wound, really? Carl Jung didn't give it that exact name, but his ideas help us uncover it. The mother wound is the psychic injury left by a mother who, in some way, consciously or unconsciously, failed to nurture the emotional development of her child. It's the gap between what you needed and what you received. This isn't about perfect parenting. No mother is perfect, but some wounds cut deeper because they go unseen, unspoken, and unhealed. Jung believed the mother is the child's first mirror. Before we understand ourselves, we understand how she sees us. If she's anxious, we feel unsafe. If she's cold, we assume we're unlovable. If she's controlling, we learn to shrink. And if she abandons us physically or emotionally, we internalize that abandonment as our fault. This is where identity is formed, in the desperate attempt to earn love, safety, and approval. You start becoming who she needs you to be instead of who you truly are. You become the caretaker, the achiever, the good child, the invisible one. You disconnect from your emotions, your needs, your authentic self, just to maintain the bond. That adaptation becomes your identity. But it's a false one, and it follows you into adulthood in subtle and devastating ways. You might be drawn to emotionally unavailable partners, hoping to finally be chosen. You might fear setting boundaries, terrified of rejection or guilt. You might overfunction in every relationship, taking on everyone's emotions, but never expressing your own. You might feel responsible for everyone's happiness, but secretly feel empty inside. The mother wound isn't just about pain, it's about pattern. Until it's healed, you keep repeating the same emotional loops, recreating the dynamic you had with your mother over and over, hoping for a different ending. But it never ends until you interrupt it. That interruption begins with awareness. Recognizing that your fear of abandonment didn't start in adulthood. It began the moment you felt emotionally abandoned as a child. That your perfectionism is not ambition. It's an armor you built to be accepted. That your constant self-doubt isn't your fault. It's a message you absorbed every time your feelings were ignored or invalidated. This is the painful part, because it requires you to see yourself and your mother clearly, maybe for the first time. It requires you to admit that something was missing, that you were never truly seen, that you had to earn a kind of love that should have been freely given. But in that clarity is freedom, because once you name the mother wound, it no longer defines you. You begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself that were lost in trying to keep her close. And that's the beginning of real identity, not one shaped by trauma, but one rebuilt through truth. Carl Jung famously said, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." We often think of the shadow as the dark, primitive parts of ourselves, our anger, jealousy, shame, but what we rarely realize is that some of the deepest shadow we carry isn't ours. It's inherited, projected, embedded, and often it starts with our mother. The mother becomes the first God, the first mirror. Her voice becomes our inner voice. Her judgment becomes our self-judgment. Her limitations become the boundaries of our identity. But when there's unhealed pain, that maternal presence doesn't stay outside you. It becomes internalized. You absorb her wounds, her fears, her patterns, and you begin to act them out unconsciously as your own. Jung called this psychic phenomenon the mother complex, when the internalized image of the mother dominates your inner world. For some, it looks like perfectionism, always trying to live up to her impossible standards, self-criticism, echoing the disapproval she used to give, insecurity, never feeling enough because she never affirmed you, guilt, anytime you prioritize your needs over others. But perhaps most dangerously, the shadow of your mother shows up in your relationships. You may unknowingly seek her out in romantic partners, chasing her approval through people who emotionally withhold from you. You may find yourself parenting others, becoming the caregiver, because that's how you were taught to earn love. Or without realizing it, you may begin to mirror her behavior, becoming critical, distant, or overly controlling toward the people you care about. This is the true legacy of the unexamined mother wound. You either become her, or you keep trying to fix her through other people, and all of this happens in the unconscious. You're not choosing it, but it's running your life. This is the moment when many people feel afraid. They say, "Am I doomed to repeat her patterns? Will I always carry this pain?" The answer is no. Jung's entire life's work was dedicated to one idea, that through self-awareness, integration, and deep inner work, we can break free from the unconscious forces that bind us. To do that, you have to meet the shadow, not to fight it, not to hate it, but to understand it. Because when you finally see the mother you carry inside, you gain the power to choose who you want to be outside. You can stop acting from inherited fear. You can stop projecting your pain onto others. You can begin responding instead of reacting. You can become conscious. And in that awareness, the mother's shadow no longer owns you. You don't need to destroy her to heal. You just need to stop letting her story become your identity. Sometimes, the most damaging thing a mother can do isn't neglect or abuse, it's emotional enmeshment. At first glance, enmeshment can look like closeness, like love. It's the mother who tells you everything, who needs you to be her best friend, who confides in you when she's lonely or anxious, who leans on you, depends on you, and makes you responsible for her happiness. And as a child, you rise to the occasion. Because what choice do you have? Carl Jung believed that when a parent projects their unmet needs onto a child, the child becomes a container for the parent's shadow. You're no longer seen as your own person. You become a function in your mother's emotional world. That's emotional enmeshment, when your boundaries are blurred, when your emotions revolve around hers, when your sense of self is so tied to her approval, you don't even realize where you end and she begins. You stop asking, "What do I want?" Instead, you ask, "What would make her happy?" This becomes your compass, your identity, your survival strategy, but eventually you start to notice the cost. You might become someone who avoids conflict at all costs because standing up for yourself feels like betrayal. You might feel emotionally suffocated in relationships, yet terrified of distance. You might keep seeking validation from others, never trusting your own inner voice. And deep down, you carry a silent, aching question. Who am I if I'm not who she wanted me to be? This is the crisis of the enmeshed child turned adult. Your entire identity has been formed as a response to someone else's needs, not through freedom, not through exploration, but through emotional obligation. Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self, requires separating from these unconscious ties. It doesn't mean cutting off your mother. It means untangling yourself from the web of who you had to be for her. This is not easy. Enmeshment can feel like love. Breaking free can feel like betrayal. You may feel guilt, fear, even grief. Because in many ways, you're not just letting go of her. You're letting go of the version of yourself that kept her close. But on the other side of that grief is truth. The truth that your needs matter, that your feelings are valid, that you are allowed to have boundaries, to say no, to live a life that looks nothing like hers. And here's the paradox. When you stop living to please your mother, you finally start becoming a whole person, not the shadow of her dreams, not the echo of her wounds, but your own self. That's where healing begins. When you stop measuring your worth through her eyes and start seeing yourself clearly for the first time. Carl Jung described the process of becoming your true self as individuation. It's not about becoming perfect. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming whole, bringing the conscious and unconscious into harmony, integrating your light and shadow, reclaiming the parts of you that were lost, rejected, or buried, often in childhood and often because of your mother. Individuation begins the moment you ask, "What parts of me have I abandoned just to stay loved?" This is where the real journey starts. It's not loud or dramatic. It's subtle, quiet, sacred. It happens in the spaces where you finally choose yourself, even if it means disappointing the one person you were always trying to protect. Jung taught that healing isn't about rejecting the mother or the past. It's about integrating them. It's seeing her clearly, both the love and the limitations. It's saying, you did the best you could, and it still hurt. It's allowing both truths to exist, without resentment, but also without denial. Because until you do that, your identity will still be a reaction, not a creation. Here's what individuation looks like in practice. Facing the shadow. You begin by confronting the parts of yourself you were taught to hide, your anger, your sadness, your unmet needs. You stop labeling them as wrong and start recognizing them as human. This takes courage, because the child in you still fears being unloved if you express these things. But every time you allow yourself to feel without shame, you take a step toward wholeness. Setting boundaries. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for your existence. You realize that saying no doesn't make you bad. It makes you honest. You start trusting your limits instead of ignoring them to avoid guilt. And perhaps for the first time, you make peace with the discomfort that comes from prioritizing your needs. Reparenting yourself. You begin to give yourself the love you were always seeking. You become the nurturing mother within, the one who listens to your fears, who holds space for your pain, who reminds you that you are enough. You stop waiting for her to give you what she couldn't. You become what she wasn't able to be, for yourself. Letting go of the fantasy. You stop chasing the perfect mother, the one who would finally show up, say sorry, make it right. You grieve that loss. You sit with the sorrow, and then you let go, not because you don't care, but because you're ready to stop living in the past. Creating a new identity. Once the fantasy dies, your real self begins to live. You start making choices not out of fear or guilt, but out of desire and alignment. You surround yourself with people who see you. You begin to explore your own values, dreams, and purpose. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." It's not a straight path. There will be relapses. There will be days when you feel like a child again, scared, confused, aching for the comfort that never came. But now, you have tools. You have awareness. You have choice. And slowly, with each act of self-honesty, you break the cycle. You stop carrying your mother's pain. You stop trying to fix her through your relationships. You stop abandoning yourself just to belong. You start coming home to you. The deepest healing never begins with blame. It begins with truth. And the truth is, your mother shaped you, but she does not define you. She may have given you life, but she does not own your future. Carl Jung understood this better than most. He didn't teach that we should hate our parents, or sever ties, or remain victims of our past. He taught that we must face the roots of our pain, not to stay in them, but to rise from them. And in this journey, the relationship with your mother is often the deepest root. So many people spend their entire lives running from that truth. They say, she meant well, or she had it worse than I did, or it wasn't that bad. But healing doesn't require comparison. It requires honesty, because what you don't name owns you. The mother wound is not just about what happened. It's about what didn't happen. The love that felt conditional, the comfort that never came, the parts of you that had to go silent to stay safe. And here's what no one tells you. It's okay to feel hurt by someone you love. It's okay to hold compassion for your mother and still acknowledge the pain she caused. You don't have to choose between honoring her and honoring your truth. That false choice is part of the wound. What Jung's work reminds us is that healing happens when we move beyond black and white thinking, when we stop seeing our parents as gods or devils and start seeing them as human, fallible, flawed, wounded themselves, and when we stop waiting for them to give us something they may never be able to offer, we begin to offer it to ourselves. This is the moment of liberation. You are no longer the child who needed to be chosen. You are the adult who chooses. You choose what love looks like now. You choose what you believe about yourself. You choose how you show up in the world, not as a reaction, but as a creation. This is the final step of individuation. When the mother within you, the voice that shamed you, doubted you, silenced you, is replaced with one that sees you, honors you, and protects you, that voice is your own. And once that happens, something miraculous unfolds. The world no longer feels like a threat. You no longer seek validation from people who echo your wounds. You no longer mistake abandonment for love. Instead, you begin to live in alignment. You form relationships based on truth, not trauma. You express yourself freely without guilt. You finally feel safe, not because the world changed, but because you did. So if you've been wondering why you feel stuck, why love feels confusing, why success doesn't fill the emptiness, why you feel like a stranger to yourself, look back. Not with blame, not with bitterness, but with brave, radical honesty. Ask yourself, what part of me did I bury to be accepted? Whose pain am I still carrying? And who might I become if I finally put it down? Because here's the truth. You will never fully heal until you understand this about your mother. That the pain wasn't your fault, that her wounds weren't a reflection of your worth, that you are allowed to become someone entirely different, and you can. You are not broken. You are becoming. Not despite the wound, but through it. This is your rebirth. This is your power. This is your path home.